Alright then, homies, I want to share something with you today. I know a lot of people ain't gonna like it, but hey, it is what it is, alright? So, the thing that really got me believing was seeing the parallels to a lot of the abstract or esoteric stuff that I'd thought about a lot and talked about a lot, and the framework that's laid out within the Bible, or at least as I interpreted the one that's laid out in the Bible. And I know a lot of people don't like old Chuck Missler, and they really don't like talk about things like dimensions or hyperspace or concepts and math and physics and such, but hey, oh well, too bad. So anything that God does can violate anything. Ultimately, it's his say-so. But I have noticed that a lot of this stuff is much more tangibly real than people understand, or even want to understand. There are people out there, I don't know if he's still doing it, but like Eddie Bravo in that one Joe Roganstein podcast where he was sitting there entertaining out loud whether or not satellites are all fake. Okay? I think that's pretty frickin' ridiculous. I know people who've done halo jumps. I know people who've jumped out of aircraft so frickin' high that you can see the curvature of the earth. And no, they weren't Freemasons. No, they're not lying to me. No, they're not MK Ultra victims. There's a curve to this thing. Uh-oh, here comes trouble. Now, if saying that hasn't caused you to go into spasms of maybe we can continue. Now, dating back to like the Middle or Dark Ages, there's stories about humans encountering entities, demonic beings, terrifying things. And along with these beings would come a terrible smell, something like sulfur or ammonia. And weirdly enough, you see that same characteristic in some stories about alien abduction or alien encounters. Not only that, but how many times do you hear people claim that you can read minds in the presence of aliens, so-called aliens? Oh, we communicated telepathically, oh, this and that. How many stories are there from pilots encountering, quote-unquote UFOs? And when a pilot goes to fire his weapon or something, this thing seems to preempt it by either moving, disappearing, or disabling the craft they're in. And I got one more thing, and then I'll try to tie it all together. What happens when a person goes outside of Earth's atmosphere? Like when a person goes real high up. It's flat, you can't do that! Okay, let's take that argument off the table, right? So let's look at reality. What happens when a person goes far enough out there? Bit by bit, their structure is torn apart. They are exposed to very damaging radiation. Okay? So what do these three things have in common? The bad smell that people report going back centuries in the presence of these things, the characteristic or quality of telepathy or something that resembles telepathy in the presence of these things, and the fact that a human is not meant to exist in space. What do these three things have in common? And I'll throw one more in there for the heck of it. What does the surface of Mars, allegedly, have in common with a place called Gomorrah? Alright, so to go back to the beginning, how many of you have heard stories about investigations into, UFO sightings or landings, or even sightings of allegedly paranormal things, where a Geiger counter is brought into the picture, and people say there is an unusual amount of radiation here? Over the years, I've started to get a very distinct idea about this, and it's that there is a limit to what violating the veil allows. You could think of it like God was kind enough to put this check and balance here that stops these things from showing themselves freely for extended amounts of time, at least in most cases. Now, I know there's precedent to point out certain demonic types or beings that are bound in certain places. Yes, absolutely. But, for instance, in the Bible, we're told not to consult spirits and to engage in magic and all this stuff. Well, just because we're told not to does not mean it's impossible. We do have free will, with all the cost that comes with it. And for the record, I think it's wise to heed the advice given to us in that collection of books, more so than it is to write it off. And in fact, that axiom that we have free will and can do things even if God tells us we shouldn't or do not do them, this is one of the things that I think the flat earth types misunderstand. They want to say that we live in a dome that one cannot escape from, or that all of space is outright fake. I don't believe that that's the case. The reason that people like Elon Musk push the idea of living on Mars is because it's a violation of God's will. Now, that doesn't mean it's technically impossible, but I sure as heck wouldn't recommend it. Oh, Faceless, you believe everything NASA says? I thought you believed your Bible. Shut up. Shut up. I'm not gonna do it with the FE people. They go to like their little Discord servers and they organize raids on streams and videos that challenge their insane and patently false beliefs. Not only that, but there's been examples of like glow-in-the-darks and government assets being caught arranging these little raids. The FE people are just one of the fists that the system wields. If somebody really wants to discredit you, they attach FE stuff to what you're saying. Or if they really want to shut you up, they throw the FE maniacs at you. And I'm not going to entertain that crap. The entire FE thing was astroturfed from the get-go. And not only that, but the fact that people like Tila Tequila and all these other celebrities and influencers helped push this crap, that should be a giant red flag to you people. Anyway, to get back on track, I know for a fact that something that could be easily mistaken for mind reading or telepathy happens in the presence of these otherworldly beings. And not only that, but when you look at various encounters with UFOs, there's that strange characteristic where they seem to know what a pilot's going to do before the pilot does it. Now, there are some good biblical pretexts to indicate that Satan and beings like him can't actually read minds. And if that's the case, you know what this stuff starts to look like? Here comes the D. Dimensions. That's right. See, time is a dimension. We experience it. There are beings in more dimensions than the four we're in, and these things don't experience or perceive time the same way that we do necessarily. Now, some of my friends have proposed that these things have been around for so long and have watched us for so many ages that they can simply know what we're inclined to do before we do it, but that they're sort of guesstimating. I would disagree with that, or at least I would say that that's not entirely sufficient, because these things clearly indicate knowing a loop before it happens. Now, to the average onlooker, they would think, whoa, that thing read my mind and knew what I was going to do. But let's say that that's not what's going on. And to the more astute onlooker, they might say, that thing must have been able to predict that that's what we were going to do. But there are instances of such specific maneuvering happening that there is no way it was just guesstimating. Now, there is a characteristic I haven't considered. It's the same characteristic that makes it possible for them to make us think we're remote viewing. They have pretty impressive mental capabilities. They can generate a near perfect simulation of a situation in their minds and then present it to us. So it's quite possible that they do, in a sense, guesstimate what we're doing. That's actually possible. Only we run into the problem of, if it's not genuine mind reading, how is it that these things are able to present those images, those illusions to us? And I think it really comes down to one thing and only one thing: dimensionality. These things are of a higher dimension than us. Or maybe they're just more aware of the dimensions that they're in than we are, because the fact that just by virtue of showing up, that just by being in the presence of these things, you can feel like you can read minds and such. Maybe it's a latent characteristic that we just don't know we have. And either way, it's not one I would ever encourage people to try to invite or exploit. Because if we were meant to do it, we'd be able to do it all the time. But yeah, I'd imagine that there's a point where if you could see us in dimensions beyond anything that we can perceive, it might get to the point that our very thoughts are like physical things to you. In other words, if you had the capabilities that these things do, you could simply hold up one of your thoughts in front of one of our thoughts, aka telepathy. That's how you would transfer images. I mean, we know angels can blind people. We know that they can make people think there are things happening that aren't. Well, this stuff is real. And you can say, well, science don't exist, science don't real. But if this stuff is real, there is a way that it works within reality. How can something predict what you're going to do next? Or how can something transfer images from its mind to yours if it's not simply reading your mind? Well, I can tell you, dimensionality. By being in an aspect of hyperspace that we aren't, by having a dimensional characteristic that we are unfamiliar with. And I know some people will scoff at this, but it's just like those baddies that people see in certain experiences or while having sleep paralysis that come out of the walls or floors and such. That is exactly what would happen if something in a higher dimension was appearing before us. And not only that, but the fact that Jesus appeared in the center of the room post-crucifixion without entering through the walls or the door or anything like that, that could be explained by dimensional physics. This stuff is real. Just because we don't understand the science of it or the math behind it doesn't mean you should write all that stuff off. Now, I know this won't be for everybody, but to simply write all of this off, come on, that's a bit much. Alright, but here's another thing, another gear. What happens when these things appear in certain contexts? Well, they start to burn, or some kind of nasty smell emanates from them. And for one, it seems like they never hang out here that long, Well, what happens when you go kind of far from Earth for a while? Bit by bit, you're being torn apart. I think there's a similar thing happening when these things come here. They're not supposed to right now. Or maybe never, hopefully. I could understand some skepticism to this, but look at Revelation. It describes Michael and the angels having a war up there with Satan and the Red Boys, and they get kicked out. And once they're kicked out, where do you think they're gonna come? They're ready to move into their other apartment. And I guess the restraining force that prevents them from showing themselves here is going to be removed. There is biblical pretext for some of the stuff I'm talking about. I'm not just pulling it out of my butt. On another note, there's very much a reason that all these New Agers and people who channel aliens are saying that, they're so eager and so glad to show themselves soon. There's a reason that the mainstream is setting the stage for UFO disclosure, because these things know that their time is going to be up one day. And unfortunately, it's going to be party time down here for a little while. Anyway, I kind of feel like rounding this video up now. I'm a little bit tired. I said, what did the surface of Mars, allegedly, and Gamora have in common? Well, here's Mars, right? Assuming this picture's legit. And here's where Sodom or Gomorrah was. They both look like territories that have been smitten. And that's not something you can believe if you think everything in all of creation is no larger than what we can see into with the clouds in the sky. And if you believe that all of existence is tiny, then I guess you can't accept a crazy notion like this. Do I think we've been told the truth about a lot of things? A la NASA and such? Nope. But do I believe that the FE types got it right? Nope. Not a chance. But anyway, homies, that's all I got for you now, so take it easy. Until next time. Bye!